Well, it's that spooky month of the year, and we're almost at that spooky day of the month when people want to indulge in spooky shit. And that's what I'm doing here to make some spooky shit recommendations, specifically movies that I think are really good that I'm hoping you guys haven't seen yet. Maybe you've heard of them, just never gave them a shot. That's what this list's for. Hopefully there's at least something here that you've never heard of, or at least have heard of it, never checked out for one reason or another. Now I'm going to go ahead and put a few guidelines in place because there's going to be like a lot of obvious like, oh, why didn't you recommend this movie? Okay, to be specific, I am mostly focusing on movies from like the last 10 years or so, like modern horror films. And the reason I'm focusing on like the last decade or so is because like a lot of the older stuff, those are timeless classics. Everyone knows them. Everyone knows that you're supposed to watch The Shining. Everyone knows you're supposed to watch The Thing. You don't need to be recommended about those. Also, I'm going to be avoiding like franchise horror films. So like no Saw, no Insidious, no Conjuring and its spin-offs. Basically nothing that James Wan has been attached to. And I'm also going to be avoiding like big like one-off films that like kind of ingrained themselves into pop culture recently, like Hereditary and Get Out, where like you've heard of these films. Like there's no way you haven't been told at some point that if you want to watch a horror movie that you should watch one. You've been told. You don't need me to tell you to go watch these movies. Instead, I want to kind of like dig into my pile of horror films that I personally really love that I don't really see getting a lot of love. Like they got like attention when they first came out. People who are horror fans talked about them early on, but they've kind of just fallen to the wayside since then. And I just kind of want to put a spotlight on them. Also, this gives me finally an opportunity to talk about horror films, a genre that I am very, very passionate about. Now, I'm going to be breaking these films into categories. First off is going to be just genuine, straight-up horror films. They are horror movies to their core. That is what they are. There'll be like a few twists and turns on like the formulas, but they are just horror movies through and through. Then you have the meta horrors, which are kind of play with the genre more, and they're more of like dark comedies that are still like have a lot of horror elements to them. And then you're gonna have the comedy horrors, which are just if you want to see kind of horror movie-esque things, but you just kind of want to have a good time and laugh, there's going to be that category. So I got 3 different categories for all of your horror movie needs. First up, I have Oculus. This movie is one that I just never hear talked about, and it's really a shame. Like, even when it came out, it kind of slipped under my radar. Like, I saw the trailer, and the trailer didn't look all that great, and then I eventually just got around to seeing it like a year or so later, and I was like, holy shit, 1, this movie is great, 2, why have I not been hearing more people fucking talk about this movie? So for those who aren't familiar with Oculus and don't know the concept to it, it plays less like a standalone horror film and more like a sequel to a horror movie that never happened. Like, think if you were to watch like Insidious Chapter 2, but Insidious 1 didn't exist, but then interspersed through Insidious Chapter 2, there were flashbacks to Insidious 1, a movie that never fucking happened, and just kind of intertwined into the story. And you have kind of an idea of what Oculus is, like, as a movie. The premise for this film is about a haunted mirror. Basically, they never specify what it is. Is it, like, demonic? Was there a spell? Whatever. It doesn't matter. The mirror is evil, and it is for generations killed people and led to a lot of death and murder, yada, yada, yada. And this movie focuses on a brother-sister who, 11 years ago, their parents bought that mirror. Bad shit happened. It ruined their entire lives. The brother ended up getting counseling and rehabilitation, and he has been convinced that the events of that night that the movie is actually building up to, because like I said, like the plots intertwine in this film, and the directing in this is so goddamn sharp, where it transitions from the past to the present consistently, and it's really well done. Like the way characters will come into a scene and then walk out of a scene, and it'll be the younger versions, and like a character will start a sentence and another character will like begin like a response to it, but then it's like the flashback. It's really clever in its manipulation of time, and then that really starts playing into the more horror elements where you start losing a grasp on, okay, is this a flashback or is this happening in the characters' minds in this moment and the mirror is directly fucking with them? Sometimes it's both. But yeah, it's fascinating because these two siblings are trying to figure out, like, you know, like, okay, the mirror's evil, or at very least the sister believes the mirror is evil. The brother has been convinced that it never happened, that he was crazy, and that he has gotten help, and he's been able to process everything that happened. He's trying to convince her otherwise, and like the sisters like rigs up all these cameras and like rigs up a giant lever with a spike on it that'll smash the mirror if they don't like reset a timer every, like, I think like 15-20 minutes, however long it is. And like the longer they stay in the house, the more the mirror kind of fucks with them. And because of the nature of the film, like that it is, okay, here's our characters, we just got the mirror, she sets up the house, like the mirror's already been established as evil. Like I said, it starts off more like a sequel where you already have the context for the evil bad shit, so it doesn't need to build up to it. So you're constantly kind of switching back and forth between the past and the present, and the buildup is already there, and the bad shit starts happening immediately. And yeah, no, Oculus is a great fucking movie. And only recently, like, and by recently I mean earlier today when I was rewatching Oculus, which is what inspired me to do this entire video, I had found out, like, looked through the filmmaker's like filmography, like what else has he done, and I was just like, oh, he's done like all these other horror movies that have been recommended to me in the past. I really should have checked up on this guy. So yeah, Oculus, such a good movie, very easy recommendation. Go check it out. So the next recommendation is It Follows, which is it's about, I don't know how to really explain. It's about like an invisible monster that can take the form of anybody. And if you're wondering, well, why does it have to take the form of people if it's invisible? Well, the people it's trying to kill are the ones that that can see it. So if the monster is after you, you can see it. And how do you see the monster? Well, you sleep with someone who can see the monster. So basically, it's like a curse. It's a chain curse. So like if someone who is cursed has sex with someone else, the curse now passes on to them, and the creature will now come after them, like the person you slept with, instead of coming after you. But if the monster gets them and kills them, the monster will then backtrack to you again. So yeah, that is the premise of this film, and it really uses its premise to its advantage. Obviously, like, you know, the concept here is that it's like an allegory for STDs and all of that. And I'm gonna say right now, the film, like, if you're someone who gets really hung up on like the logic of a movie, you might end up hating this one, because there's a lot of things that the monster will do where you're like, well, why did it take that form? That wasn't very advantageous. Why is it doing this thing if it's supposed to just be coming directly for them? And it's more of like the directing is done in a way to create this ever-present sense of dread that the monster is just always looming, always there. It's like, even though it is a physical entity, it could just be anywhere at any point. When you see them in crowded areas, you're like, is that thing it? Or is that just a person walking down the street? Because like I said, it can take the form of any person, and they use this so well to their advantage. Also, the fact that it's also invisible, they use to their advantage. and because certain characters can see it, and obviously certain characters can't. Those who have been infected obviously can. Those who are like, okay, we saw some crazy weird shit happen. We know that this is real, and we're gonna try and save you. So you have like that whole concept, and it's just the whole thing is just really, really good. Like I said, if you're the type of person who gets caught up on the logic of a movie and like everything needs to make like 100% sense, you're gonna get bugged by this movie. I don't. I think it's great. I think it's one of those movies that it's, you know, the directing doesn't bother me. The directorial choices and the actions and the writing don't bother me because it all kind of like fits within the concept of the film. Also, the film has that kind of timeless thing going on where you're not quite sure where this movie takes place. Is it like the 80s, the 90s? Is it set in modern day? Like this one girl has like a weird kind of like little gadget that's like it has like a touch screen on that looks like a seashell, and you don't really quite know what she's doing on it. Like, so yeah, like the time period of the film is very, very vague, which I think also works to the film's advantage. It gives it that older feel, like that kind of 80s like horror movie vibe to it. And also there's a lot of things in the movie that are throwbacks to 80s films, the soundtrack especially. Certain little gimmicky things that they do, like a girl running in high heels from the monster. That's a thing that happens right at the beginning of the film too. So yeah, if you like really unique, kind of weird, out there horror films that are just really intense, yeah, It Follows is also, if you're not, like I said, hung up on those logic issues, It Follows is a really, 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 really good one. Up next is The Witch, and The Witch is, well, it's about a witch. It's about like these old-timey puritanical Christians. They get exiled from like the village that they live in. I think for being too crazy Christian. I think that's what it is. Where like if, which is weird to think, like if you're like the crazy puritanical Christian family in a crazy puritanical Christian like village, man, how fucked are you? But yeah, they go off to live on their own. A witch at the beginning of the movie eats their baby basically. And then you're kind of just left out in the creepy ether of the film. The best thing that I could recommend this to is Hereditary in terms of like its tone, where it's not like scary, it's just eerie. It creeps under your skin and it's unsettling. I would say Hereditary is definitely a better film, but The Witch is also really goddamn good. The movie was actually really off-putting to me when the first time I'd ever seen it, because I'm like, I'm getting creeped out, but like I felt like I was getting creeped out by the wrong stuff. Very specifically, by the crazy puritanical Christian family. Because, like, you know, I'm an atheist. I'm not super fond of Christians, like the hardcore Christians, and, you know, like all the things that they do, especially in America, where they try to put certain laws in place that they fuck over the LGBT community. Just saying. But like seeing this movie and just like I'm like, oh my god, like the Christians are more fucking terrifying than the witch, I think. And then I realized afterwards, I'm like, by the end of the movie, I'm like, that was the entire fucking idea of this film. That like, yeah, there's an actual evil out there that has been established, but the crazy puritanical Christian family is just as fucking terrifying, and their paranoia of the satanic and the evil and all of that makes them just as dangerous as the witch that we see at the very beginning. So yeah, The Witch, really good. I don't have too much to say about it because it's a pretty straightforward film. It's a tone piece. There's a long stretches of not a lot happening in it, but it's always really good at just kind of having that eerie tension to it, pretty much from beginning to end. So yeah, The Witch, if that sounds like it's your bag, definitely check that one out. Then there's the Babadook, which is another tone piece kind of horror film, very kind of slow burn. The concept of the Babadook is you have a woman by herself raising her, I guess, autistic child. I don't really. He has something wrong with him socially or mentally that makes him difficult to deal with, and you see like all the strain and pressure, emotional and mental pressure puts on his mother. And uh he has like this book like the Babadook, and it's about this monster, and basically the monster is real and actively kind of fucking with them. Like it's a monster movie, but it's also like a slow burn tone piece, and it's kind of like a psychological horror element to it. It's good. It's fucking good. Like people have been bragging about the Babadook and how other people should go see it. It was really popular when it came out a few years ago, and uh it was like one of those must-see horror films. I think it's actually an Australian film. So like it came out there and then it just kind of completely slipped under the radar and I don't ever hear it mentioned anymore. So yeah, the Babadook, like I said, I don't have that much to say about it other than it's creepy and unsettling. And like I said, it's a monster movie. It's a tone piece. It's kind of a psychological horror film. It's a lot of different things, but it's also good AF. And you should check out the Babadook if you're into any of that. And now for a more traditional recommendation, because I feel like I've been recommending kind of off-kilter horror films that might not be for everything. Actually, never mind. Oculus, I think, could appeal to anybody. And I think this one also could appeal to anybody. And that is Don't Breathe. It's a home invasion film where the person who's having their home invaded is the monster of the movie, basically. The premise of the film is three thugs. It's like, well, really like a thug, and then like his two kind of morally askew friends decide to break into this old guy's house because they assume he has a lot of money, and they're just gonna rob him. And this is like a quick in and out, just take his money and go. Well, it turns out the guy is blind. That's something, I believe that's something that they knew going in. And very quickly they learn not only is he blind, but also he's like this ex-military super badass with like daredevil fucking sonar hearing shit. And even though he can't see, he can hear well enough to know where they're at and to defend himself. And he just straight up murders one immediately. So then you're down to these two characters trying to escape this guy's impenetrable fortress house that he has locked them in, and he is hunting them down. And it's really intense because even though the people who broke into his house are technically the bad guys, you kind of fear for them because they make them likable enough that you kind of feel that tension and like, oh shit, are they actually going to make it out? And the movie does enough different things with them that it's never really boring. It never like runs out of ideas. And then there's a third act plot twist that kind of recontextualizes the old man and makes you go, oh shit. Actually, I just realized because of that scene, that this plot twist, never mind. Maybe this movie isn't for everybody because like there's a whew, okay, there's an element of this movie that if you're like squeamish, especially like, you know what, a bit of a rape trigger warning. It's not really rape. No, okay, fine, now fuck it. It's pretty rape-tacular. Though the old man claims that is not rape. It's pretty much rape. So yeah, no, if you're squeamish to that, then don't watch this movie. It is not for everybody. I lied. I forgot. But yeah, if you're not squeamish to that and you have not seen this movie and have not heard of it, check it out. It's, like I said, it's intense. It's just nerve-wracking. Like it's one of those good on the edge of your seat horror films. And like, I would say that kind of goes for like everything I've recommended, where like a lot of stuff I've recommended have been more like kind of eerie, gets under your skin, tenses you up. This is more of like the thrill ride horror film where you're just kind of tense up a bit while watching it, and you're just like, oh shit, what the hell's gonna be the next fucked up thing that happens? And none of these are Bugatti films, I should also clarify. I hate the Bugachas, the jump scare, we got you. It's fuck off with that. No, I'm like I like that psychological horror. I like that shit that creeps in under my skin. I like things that uses really clever directing to add tension to a scene before a good scare. And that's what basically all of these films are like. I mean, you're going to get the occasional jump scare, but you're not going to have a movie primarily dominated by jump scares. Next up is the meta horror. And by meta, I mean like movies that kind of play with the genre and have a bit of a dark, humorous twist to them. The first one of these is Drag Me to Hell. And this is a Sam Raimi film that, like, I'm surprised doesn't get talked about more because it is like you're talking about Sam Raimi like right after like Spider-Man 3. So he's still riding high and he puts out this horror movie. He's going back to his Evil Dead roots. And like it's like a lot of people liked it, but then it just kind of fell off and people don't talk about it anymore. And that's kind of a shame. So the concept of Drag Me to Hell is a woman ends up pissing off a gypsy woman, another woman who's basically puts a gypsy curse on her, which now that I'm saying this out loud, I'm like, ooh, oh, that's a bit hashtag problematic. But it's incredibly campy, incredibly like funny in places, but also it's Sam Raimi, so it has a lot of really great visual horror elements that are actually intense and scary. So yeah, like Drag Me to Hell is like I don't have that much to say about it other than that's the premise, and then bad gypsy curse shit happens to this woman throughout the film. And she's trying to break the curse before she is quite literally dragged to hell. Like to give you an idea of this movie, like there's a talking goat that like yells "fuck you" and like bites somebody. Like that is the kind of movie I'm recommending you right now. But like I said, even having dumb shit like that is genuinely funny, it's a good horror film on top of it. So yeah, there's Drag Me to Hell. Next is, well, you're next. This one is a home invasion film, and what kind of makes this one so different, and okay, this is actually kind of a little bit of a spoiler, but I can't actually recommend this film without explaining why you should watch it. Because if I just said, like, oh, it's a home invasion film, and it's a really good home invasion film, that doesn't fucking tell you shit. So yeah. Concept is family get together, big old family reunion thing, and at this kind of summer home, and then the home invasion happens. Like these three guys who look like the Wyatt family in like animal masks show up and are systematically just taking people out. And there's a reason for it, and there's a lot of dark humorous elements to it. But the big twist of the film is when one of the characters is in severe danger, and then she just straight up murders one of the guys. Like she starts fighting back, and it's just like, what? And it's just like, oh yeah, like my father was a huge survival nut and prepared me for a lot of things. So yeah, like we need to do this, and we need to set these traps, and we need to do that. And like as the film goes on, like it starts changing in its tone, where it goes from a home invasion horror film to a survivalist film, where you have this woman who is fighting back against these intruders, trying to keep as many people alive as she can, mostly trying to just keep herself alive. And by the end of it, like the entire tone of the film has changed to where she is the hunter versus like the hunted, and like the roles have reversed, and she is just out for blood. And like the 80s or 70s synth like bass beat soundtrack just kicks in, and like there's a big mood change. It's great. It has it's a really good genre shift film where you start off here and then you end there. There's some laughs to be had legitimately. But fuck, man, like it gets intense, and some of the scares, like they come out of nowhere in a lot of places and are jarring as fuck. So yeah, like You're Next, really, really goddamn good. Okay, so the next one I want to recommend, I actually am not quite sure like where it really falls in terms of its obscurity, because I feel like it's a movie that like everybody recommended and everybody saw. But I feel like it's also kind of old enough that people that's kind of fallen to the wayside. So maybe some of you guys haven't seen it yet, and that is The Cabin in the Woods, which is a film I believe written by Joss Whedon, directed by somebody else, which the premise on its face seems like your generic a bunch of teenagers go to a cabin in the woods and then bad spooky monster shit happens to them. And this is another film where I can't talk about like what makes it great without getting into spoilers. So, okay. Um like if you do not want to get spoiled for this film at all, which is how I recommend seeing it. I don't recommend watching a trailer. I don't recommend you listening to what I'm about to say. Cabin in the Woods is best experienced blind. I had first heard about it from a Movie Bob review, and Movie Bob was just like, hey, if you haven't seen the trailer for this movie and haven't had it ruined for you, because I had never heard of it yet, skip this review. Skip this review, go watch this fucking movie right now. And that's what I did. I stopped his review, and I went and I saw that movie with zero, like, concept of what it was going to be, and I was very pleased. So yeah, if you don't want to get spoiled, just jump ahead to the time code on the screen, where I'll be talking about the next movie, and, alright, I'm gonna get into the Cabin in the Woods spoilers now. So the cause of all the bad spooky shit is actually a giant shadow organization that is like basically part of another like bigger organization that is causing spooky horror movie shit happening all over the world. And different territories are doing different horror movie cliche things in their territory. And in America, like they had like a board of all the different things that they could inflict upon these people, and you have like a knockoff of Hellraiser. You have like giant murderous animals, like zombies, hillbilly murdered zombie family, which is what they actually end up doing, and they intentionally shift the characters that they have into pre kind of determined molds where like oh well we need a dumb jock, so we're going to pump chemicals into like his room, and even though he's like this super smart guy, we're gonna make him into a big dumb horny jock. We're going to put chemicals into this girl's hair bleach to make her dumber. We're going to basically like well you're the virgin character even though you're not really a virgin. So yeah, there's like they try to put them into stereotypical horror movie roles, even if they're actually real, layered, nuanced human beings and not archetypes in real life. And this is all done to appease basically elder gods who are a metaphor for the horror movie going audience, where they're like, oh, this has to be like this because that's what that's what they demand. They being us, the audience, which is trying to explain in a meta context why horror movies are so formulaic and lazy and dumb. So yeah, it's really good. Like if you needed to hear this to go watch it, hopefully this has convinced you. It sucks that you don't get to go in blind, but yeah, like if you're listening to this, go watch Cabin in the Woods. It's really like it's definitely one of my favorites that I've already recommended. Like it's really goddamn good. And then finally, for the kind of dark comedy, more kind of meta movies. Uh, okay, this one's actually kind of cheating because it's really more of a Christmas movie, but it's a Christmas monster horror movie called Krampus or Krampus, and it is about Krampus, the Santa-like German monster of folklore, um, basically coming and terrorizing a family. Like it's imagine like if Home Alone, like instead of them going on vacation and leaving a kid by himself, all the shitty family showed up to the kid's house and they were having Christmas there, and then a bunch of crazy Christmas themed monsters showed up in their house. This is a movie that just okay, like I've said this about like pretty much all these movies. Like nobody really talks about these movies anymore. I've never heard anybody really talk about Krampus. It is such like it's such a fun movie. That's the thing. Like it's a good solid horror film, but it's also a really fun movie with a lot of personality. And like it's one of those kind of kids horror movies, like horror movies for the whole family kind of thing, where like you can sit down with your kids and watch this horror movie, and as long as they can deal with like a little bit of blood and like some violence, tame PG-13 blood and violence, they can easily watch this movie. It has killer like teddy bears and killer gingerbread men, and Krampus shows up and he's got like big ass fucking like he's dressed as Santa Claus wearing like a skin face and giant horns, and yeah, like the practical effects in this movie are amazing because like it's a lot of practical effects, and it feels like a movie that came from the 80s or 90s. Like it feels like it has like that 90s Home Alone type vibe to it, but the premise feels like something that fell out of the 80s. So yeah, it's really good. Like seriously, if you watch Gremlins as your Christmas horror movie of choice, skip it. I watched Gremlins for the first time like a month ago. Gremlins wasn't that good. It's mediocre at best. Krampus is a much better horror film that I could easily recommend to anybody. Like, in fact, if you don't want to watch this for Chris or for Halloween, save it for Christmas. If you have some kids also that are like old enough for like tame-ish horror films, watch it with the family. It's a lot of fun. It has some genuinely heartwarming moments. It has some legitimately funny moments, and it's got some legitimately scary moments. So yeah, Krampus, great holiday horror film, just not for this holiday. Okay, let me just go ahead and state right now, I am aware that Michael Dougherty, the director of Krampus, also directed Trick or Treat, an actual Halloween horror movie that would have made way more sense as a recommendation. The reason I did not do that one is because I haven't seen Trick or Treat. It is a big blind spot for me. I need to fix that. Hopefully, maybe I'll do that this year. Maybe I'm going to do that this year. But yeah, I just could not recommend a movie I hadn't seen yet. So yeah, Trick or Treat's supposed to be good. I didn't recommend it because I hadn't seen it. Sorry. Krampus is really good too, though. And now we're at the comedy horrors, where they are comedies first and foremost, with some horror elements. And I feel like there's only like two I could easily recommend to people. One of them you've probably already fucking heard of, Tucker and Dale versus Evil. I feel like it's like the one that everybody always recommends to people. It is basically this kind of humorous subversion of like the murderous hillbilly trope in horror films, where a bunch of teenagers meet some hillbillies, and due to a series of misunderstandings, they think the hillbillies have kidnapped one of their friends and is trying to kill them, and it turns out really the girl just hit her head, and they're trying to take care of her and nurse her back to health. And these kids, in their attempt to fight off the hillbillies, end up just accidentally killing themselves. So then Tucker and Dale, the hillbillies, are now thinking that these teenagers are part of some sort of suicide death cult. And they're like shitting their pants, terrified of these kids, while also trying to keep the girl safe. And the girl's like trying to like talk to her friends about how it's not the way it seems, and it's wild. And the ending is fucking ridiculous. It's hilarious as shit. And I like the big plot twist about what happens with, I guess you could call the film's villain, is it's so fucking dumb, but it's also so fucking funny. So yeah, Tucker and Dale versus Evil, really good. If you want like a good comedy film that's also a horror movie, or at least makes fun of horror movies. And then there's The Babysitter. This one is on Netflix. Also, by the way, Tucker and Dale is like pretty much on Netflix like all the goddamn time. So it's probably on Netflix right now, so you could probably just like watch that super easy. And then there's The Babysitter, which is a Netflix original movie. And it's kind of this 80s throwback movie where, the babysitter is part of this weird satanic cult, and they're doing satanic cult shit, and the kid catches them, and then he becomes the target, and just chaos kind of ensues. Like I said, much like Tucker Dale, pretty funny movie. Not as funny as Tucker and Dale versus Evil, but it's funny. It has a lot of like really good kills. It's got some really good horror elements. Got a really good soundtrack. Yeah, like a lot of these movies are gonna notice have like really good, like especially like the throwback ones. It Follows has a really great synth soundtrack. Which You're Next, The Babysitter, like all of these kind of 80s throwback ones have really good electronica soundtracks that just kick a lot of ass. So yeah, that is all of it. That's all the movies. Hopefully at least one of these you haven't heard of before, and you'll get to experience something new because of this. And that would be awesome. If you guys end up watching any of these movies, please like comment below. Let me know what you thought of them, even if you disliked them, because I'm curious what people think of like the movies that I really love, whether they like them or not. I'm not the type of person who gets angry if you dislike a thing I like. So yeah, go check any of these out. They're all really goddamn good. If I know where they're streaming, I will put links in the description below, so that way you can easily find them. So yeah, happy Halloween.